Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity. My name is Molly, and today I am going to be sharing with you my story of hope and sobriety and mental health and how it has paved the way for forgiveness and healing around my anxiety and shame about one of our favorite subjects, and that is money. And more specifically, I'm going to be telling my story about how I spent the better part of a 6-figure inheritance and 8 years of my life creating revolutionary work that I designed for parents and teachers, but that came across as a watered-down version of another academic program for kids. And I completely own that miscommunication because at the time, I lacked clarity and confidence. And so now I invite you on my journey towards reclaiming my clarity and confidence and my message for empowering women. So for those of you who know me, either in real life or on social media, you probably know me as Molly the Math Rebel. And I bet I know what some of you are thinking. Oh no, is she gonna make us do the Pythagorean Theorem? Well, you can all relax, because in the next 10 to 15 minutes, there will be no calculations, no equations, no formulas, and no theorems. And that's probably very good news for you, because I bet most of you have not seen the Pythagorean Theorem since high school, or possibly college. So while you might not remember the Pythagorean Theorem, and that's perfectly okay, you probably remember how the Pythagorean Theorem made you feel. And unfortunately, for many in the audience, and especially for women, it probably made you feel not so good, which is why you're probably tempted to tune me out. But please listen to my message. And let me just say, as a disclaimer, when I was a child and a teenager, I never struggled in math. It was quite the opposite, in fact, because even at my old elementary school, even years later, the teachers and secretary who are still there are still telling the story about how I taught myself fractions when I was in kindergarten. So some of you might be a little intimidated by me, but throughout my childhood and adolescence, when I was growing up, I was overweight, socially awkward, and struggled with mental health issues. And so the way that I used to feel about all of the above is probably very similar to the way that many of you have felt about math. So when I would get waited at a doctor's office, or when I would get bullied at summer camp, it's probably very similar to feelings to when your teachers would make you solve a problem at the board, or when your parents would yell at you about your report card. Feelings of being ashamed, defective, frustrated, overwhelmed, misunderstood, confused, and alone. In other words, not good feelings. But I'm here to tell you today that you are not alone, because negative feelings about math are very common, especially among girls and women. And in young girls, they can start as early as age 7. And the reason that these feelings are more common in girls and women is not because girls and women have less aptitude in math or science or finances, but because of social conditioning. And unfortunately, that social conditioning is often passed down through the generations, from parents and teachers and grandparents to the next generation. And so my message is about becoming aware of those social stereotypes and these emotional effects so that they don't affect the next generation. Because unfortunately, the way it is now, most people see math as a very logical, very linear, very rational, very rigid subject with a right way and a wrong way, with little to no room for emotions. And that is a mistake. And here is why. Because I have been a math teacher and a math tutor on and off since 2006, and I've worked with both mainstream and special needs populations. And what I have found is that math can be a highly emotional subject that brings up a lot of deep emotions. And unfortunately, when these emotions are not acknowledged, then they can backfire and they can become worse. Just about 6 months ago, I was paid a very respectable compliment, and I was called the Brene Brown of math shame. So for those of you who don't know, Brene Brown is a leading expert and global authority on shame, vulnerability, courage, and leadership, all concepts which I wish to infuse into my message about both math and money for all generations. And more recently, Brene Brown has called our recent pandemic a collective experience in collective vulnerability. And let me just say that according to Brene Brown, vulnerability is not a sign of weakness. As a matter of fact, it's exactly the opposite, because showing your vulnerability takes courage, and that can be a role model for others in expressing their own vulnerability so that then we can heal it on a global level. And the same thing is true for both math and money. But I wasn't always the Brene Brown of math shame. Up until about 18 months ago, whenever somebody would ask the dreaded question, "What do you do for a living?" I would give a generic response. "Oh, I'm a math anxiety specialist." "Oh, I'm a math tutor." "Oh, I wrote a book about math anxiety." And then I would say that better than 50% of women and an occasional man would all give some variation of the same common response. I wish you would have been around when I was young. And I completely get it. Just like I wish that I would have had a different experience with Weight Watchers and summer camp when I was growing up, a lot of people wish that they would have had a different experience with math when they were growing up. But unfortunately, those negative feelings can affect them for a lifetime, and it can affect their careers and their families and their finances. And that is why, as ironic as it may sound, the adults who wish they would have had me when they were younger are the ones who need to hear my message today. And that is especially true if they are parents or grandparents or teachers, because they are responsible for setting the tone for the next generation and breaking the cycle of the feelings of math anxiety and math shame. But once again, up until about 18 months ago, I didn't have the clarity or confidence or courage to state that. And so when someone would say that they wish they would have had me when they were younger, I would just smile, and then I would grow more and more frustrated that my message wasn't reaching the masses, and that my message was watered down, and that I would just blend in as yet another math teacher or tutor, and that I would lose my opportunity to speak my revolutionary message. And so often I found myself reaching for a glass of wine to soothe the frustration, either that or a binge of sweets or a Netflix binge. But then I realized it was becoming a pattern, because just to back up a bit, I published my first book in September of 2018, and the title is Beyond Math Anxiety, 99 Insights, and a Calculation's Not One. And it talks a lot about shame and vulnerability and courage and the emotional aspects of math anxiety. But once again, back then, I didn't have the courage or the confidence or the clarity to state my message clearly. And so then it got lost in the shuffle, and I would get more and more frustrated. And then the cycle would continue. So then, in January of 2019, I committed to Dry January. So for those of you who don't know, Dry January is a social movement. So basically, it's asking you to commit to abstaining from alcohol or any other vice for the duration of January. And that's not to be confused with a New Year's resolution. So I said, okay, I'm going to do it. No alcohol for all of January. So then when the 30 days were up, for those of you who live in Oregon and Washington, you'll recall that the beginning of February of last year was right around when we had that big snowstorm. So I was snowed in. So then I decided, okay, I'll extend it a few more weeks. And during that time, I did a lot of journaling, meditation, and reflection. And I realized that I wasn't going to achieve business or career success, or writing success, or public speaking success if I was always drowning my frustration with a glass of wine. And so 1 month turned into the opportunity of a lifetime. And so from there, I gained courage, clarity, confidence, and not only that, but I also gained a new avenue for my message. And that is, instead of just focusing on anxiety and shame about math, also expanding to anxiety and shame about money. Because remember, in my childhood, I never struggled in school math, but I absorbed a lot of toxic and patriarchal values about money, which unfortunately I carried with me into my adulthood, which showed through in my decisions about spending my inheritance and not owning my self-worth. So blocking myself from monetizing my mission and vision. And so my financial mistakes, which maybe I'll reframe that as financial lessons, because one of the things I learned is that there's no such thing as a mistake, only a lesson. And so my financial lessons have blossomed into expanding my message to include anxiety and shame around money and not just math, especially for women. Because as one of my old mentors says, you teach what you need to learn. And that is too true, especially in terms of my lessons about money and how they've affected me, and also owning my power and taking a stand against the patriarchy. And so my last bit of information is a little insight that I coined over the past year, and it is 3 words. So I call it the 3 S words. So don't worry, it's all clean. So 3 words that start with S that women tend to use a lot, but unfortunately, these 3 words tend to disempower women. And so I've reframed the 3 S words so that we can be empowered and so that women can have clarity and confidence in the world. So the 3 S words are should, sorry, and someday. Once again, that's should, sorry, and someday. So first of all, I'm reframing should with could. So that was just an example. That was just an example when me being awkward with my phone. So to back up a bit, I was having trouble with my Wi-Fi on my laptop. So I had to improvise at the last minute with my phone. But if I was still in the cycle of should, I was saying, oh, I should have checked my Wi-Fi. Oh, I should have put my phone on a stand, blah, blah, blah. So really, if you think about it, should it implies a sense of social obligation, which unfortunately, a lot of women have a sense of social obligation due to the patriarchy. So it's like, oh, I should take this job. Oh, I should go to this party. Oh, I should do blah, blah, blah. So really, that's a lot of social obligation. And so the way that I reframe should is with could, because could implies a sense of possibility, or better yet, go stronger and go to intend or commit. And an intention or a commitment, it comes from within you and not from societal shoulds. So once again, reframe should with could, or better yet, intend or commit. And a good example is my sobriety. So it's like instead of saying, oh, I should stop drinking, or, oh, I should cut back, I'm saying, okay, well, I could do dry January. And then at the end of dry January, I said, okay, so I commit to being alcohol free. And so the second S word is sorry. So often women are very apologetic. So I replace sorry with thank you, with one caveat. And that is, if you're truly sorry about something, so if you truly need to apologize, or if you truly need to make amends, then definitely use sorry. But for many cases, especially with women, being unapologetic is replacing sorry with thank you. So for example, instead of saying, oh, sorry, I'm late, say, thank you for your patience. And last but not least, the third S word is someday. And someday implies procrastination. So I invite you to replace someday with today, even if you can't achieve your big scary goal today. So like, for example, if you want to write a book, instead of saying, oh, well, someday I'll write a book, say, today I will write 1 page. And today, so a good current example of today would be like a lot of people might want to travel, but nobody's doing any traveling lately. So if you want to travel someday, maybe research travel destinations on the internet today. So ladies and gentlemen, hope this helps you. And once again, I'm Molly the Math Rebel. And in closing, somebody once asked, well, what are you rebelling against? And that's time I gave a long-winded answer, but for now, I've got it. I am rebelling against math shame and money shame. Thank you.